Hi, my name is Alex Klein, the Dorothy and Stephen R. Weber curator here at the Institute of Contemporary Art at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. I'm just absolutely thrilled for us to be able to host this public program in conjunction with Frieze, with our special guests, Sarah Workneh and members of GUDSKUL. And I'll be giving a brief introduction of both of them in a minute. But this has really been prompted by an exhibition that we are hosting that is actually another organization embedded within our organization. Raw Material Company from Dakar is hosting their academy within our organization. And it grew out of a project called IS for Institute that's really drilling down into the question of what is an institute, what could it mean going forward, what has it meant in the past, what are the individuals that work within institutions, so the I, the literal I in the institute, and how are individuals maybe inscribed within their institutions and what agency do they have. So this project really grew out of a very long-term dialogue, thinking about the relationships between individuals within institutions, but then also institutions themselves. And just a little bit of backstory, we had two thinking partners. One was the Kunsthal Lisbon in Portugal, who really thinks about radical hospitality and the question of relationship building for artists and organizations. And then Raw Material Company, who is offering another pedagogic framework. How do we learn from each other? And so taking a step outwards, we really wanted to think, how could we learn from each other as institutions? And this season of the Academy, which is being hosted here in Philadelphia, is under the artistic direction of the amazing artist, activist, filmmaker, Linda Goodbryant, who unfortunately could not be here today because she has a stomach bug, but her spirit is very much here and infused in everything that we've been doing here. And she really was the brainchild behind this conversation today between Sarah and GUDSKUL. So Linda has made a career of, or a worldview of building up and privileging artistic practice based on relationships, based on rethinking our need-based, our value system for art making and art practice, which is really the concept behind this academy. How do we reimagine a new arts infrastructure? It's evidenced in her work with JAM, obviously, and her current work with Project EATS. So in conversation with Linda, with Raw, with Linda's amazing thinking partner, Mariel Ingram, we really were interested in inviting you to come together to talk about centering relationships and the question of residencies and collectives as maybe being another model and perhaps providing another space of infrastructure outside of the dominant structure that we have here. So in a sense, what we've done here is an experiment. We've taken our institution and maybe try to resituate some of our own value systems or our own infrastructure, following the guidance of another organization, Raw Material Company, where individuals, relationships, conversations are at the root, as opposed to maybe thinking about a checklist or a budget first. So just to put some of those things out there. And we really have made our own kind of ecosystem here between our different organizations and individuals in the room. So really trying to think about this question of relationships. So I'm not going to go back over all of the profound questions that Linda asked, but that's, I think, a great way to just set the stage. How do we reimagine a new arts infrastructure, one that's maybe balanced on a new facilities, operations, or relationships? What would it mean if the infrastructure for values are art-based on social impact? So I'm going to leave that there and do a brief introduction to just say thank you to Terence Trouillot from Frieze magazine, editor at Frieze, for moderating this conversation, and Sarah Workneh, who has worked in alternative arts education spaces for over 20 years and is currently the co-director of Skowhegan, but has a lot of experience outside of the art world to draw in, which is something that I think has really fueled some of the conversations that we were having this morning and is I think very important for some of our sometimes very myopic art world kind of spaces. And then to GUDSKUL, which is a public learning space established in 2015 by 3 Jakarta-based art collectives. After being immersed within the realm of contemporary art for nearly 20 years, you formed an ecosystem to practice and expand the understanding of a collective. And your work with us here has really been about thinking about the individual in relationship to the collective, and the collective in relationship to the other collective to form the larger ecosystem. So we thank you all for being here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terence. So thanks so much. And thank you all.
Thank you, Alex. First off, I wanted to also thank, well, obviously Alex and ICA for inviting me to moderate this talk. Also Dulcie and Marianne from Raw Académie as well, and also the fellows. It's been a privilege and really an honor just to be here for the last day and a half, kind of being a fly on the wall and listening to conversations and getting to know some of you, and it's been a privilege. So thank you for that. And then again, thank you to Sarah and Geisha and MG joining me in conversation. And I guess I just wanted to start off, thinking about Linda Goodbryant and sort of her introduction to the program. And I've been thinking a lot about what she said in terms of that we don't really talk about art anymore. We're really concerned about the market and thinking about who sold what and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know, I'm still reeling over whether I disagree with that or I'm just having a hard time acknowledging that truth or accepting that truth. But I do think one thing she did bring up is also how, in her world or in the 70s, there was a lot of debate over art and thinking about what is good art and having conversations in that way, and also having conversations with someone you love but are deeply disagree with, or having these really hard questions and hard relationships or hard conversations. And so first off, I wanted to ask both of you, in terms of the work you do, how debate, and also kind of following up like the conversation that we just had with the fellows, how do you build space for debate, and how do you guys sort of kind of build an environment where it's there's room for heated debate and agonism and maybe fighting, and how do you resolve that as well? Does that make sense? I don't know who wants to start.
I'll start. Well, I think for one, culturally, we've kind of been built to avoid debate. Mm-hmm. And so making space for debate is really important, but it's also really important to remember, you can't only want to experience the one kind of debate where you're correct, mm-hmm. or where there's not a challenge within it. And so in a lot of what we do at Skowhegan, which inevitably is we're together for 9 weeks, there's nowhere to go, there are a lot of different kinds of people with a lot of different values in one space. So debate is just part of kind of what the life is like there. Mm-hmm. And so it's I see my role and my colleagues that are with us on site, our role is to really offer kind of the tools for productive debate. Mm-hmm. Which includes on the very base level, understanding that debate is how things are kind of moved forward. If we all agree we want things to move forward, this is one of the pathways that we have to get there. But what are the ways in which you kind of create a space where that's allowed? Mm-hmm. And also, what are the ways in which you create a space where it's understood that we all have different experience with debate, with using our voice, and so you have to kind of moderate that as well, or mediate that as well, I guess
Absolutely.
That's how I think about it.
Yeah, and I wonder what you guys think in terms of, especially, kind of organizing several different collectives into one collective, the sort of, I imagine the difficulties and stuff that comes up with so many voices. I'm curious to what that experience is like as well.
Yeah, actually, what we do is build a hangout place. Mm-hmm. Since Ruang Rupa since 2000, they have in that era these young artists having difficulty to get the spotlight, so they make their own. So, but that's like a free space, so anyone can just throw the topic and to be discussed, and then artwork to be present. So it's hangout places where there is music, where there is humor there, and then food, and that's very typical actually in Indonesia. Back to Indonesia, hangout places is everywhere, and then by that there is always something like a even it's a, we can call it a movement, or in the good way, or also in the bad way, of course. But I think that's what we start then, and it's grow right now. Right now at Good School, we also just provide the hangout space. You can hang out in the canteen area until in the classroom. We also make a room dedicated as a class, but sometimes it's not always used as a class. Sometimes used as to play a card and everything. So, I mean, that's like a basic one. And then we, after years, we realized the hangout, it's become our curriculum. That's now we are really into it to more describe that.
And also to add, we have this called house meeting where all of the collective, the 56 people gathered and then to discuss, and that's where they had the debate. So our space and how we can strategize to that is we're gonna have this rotating committee consists of who's gonna be the moderator, who's gonna do the note taking, and the head of the majlis who do the moderator will have the privilege to choose like a dress code, the theme for this majlis. They can have like a Halloween theme meetings, or having like a summer kind of meeting. So imagine like those people with pirate hats, with ghost costume, they're having a debate. So you know that when we have a heated debate, like you love this person, you admire this person, but we just have a different argument. So like to incorporate humor, silliness, easy thing, like because there's already a consent for us when we want to work in this collective. We know like the bad things of each other, but we admire each other. And also to have that setting where everybody like looks silly, we have our effort to do these dress codes, and I think that's one of the way to ease the tension. And of course, other than that is the smoking breaks. Just get out, and then like when you cannot handle the conversation, people can always go out, have the smoking breaks, and usually that's where the tension will ease and we find common ground.
I just want to also just kind of add, when we're thinking about kind of creating different kinds of spaces for debate to happen in, I think another important thing is thinking about how debate doesn't necessarily always become something that's resolved. And I think in a lot of ways, we always want things to be resolved. That's a comforting space for us. But also understanding that an important part of debate is also not necessarily that we landed an agreement, but that we can hear each other and actually move forward from kind of a non-resolved space. That's important.
Yeah, and I think from your presentation yesterday, I led this idea of, kind of a goal set that you have in terms of these meetings or these conversations is really just shared knowledge, right? And sort of, but I want to get back to this idea of humor and silliness, which was like a big part of your presentation yesterday, and it really seemed to me like a real, because I'm just so impressed how you're able to organize and so efficiently, which you said it was inefficient, but it seems based on your presentation yesterday, there's this extreme efficiency. And I think part of it, I think the glue is this idea of like humor and silliness and the sort of camaraderie that you have. And I'm curious for you, Sarah, if that's something that's also part of your values in terms of Skowhegan and sort of working through that program, with a new set of artists every year. Does that come into play in any way? I'm just curious.
I mean, I was very also impressed by I'm covering my mic. Your mode of using humor. I think as a director, I'm probably a less funny person, I would say. But I think joyfulness is a part of what we talk about a lot, just in kind of the ability to be together in a space, to have time, to be able to do whatever you want. And that is a definite like methodology of educating that we use there. It may not always, we have a lot of funny people that we work with. But yeah, joy is important. And especially for those of us that live in the world where we've experienced institutions that are not joyful. And being given the opportunity for like unfettered joy or unencumbered joy or joy that you're not allowed to have in other spaces is really important, allowing you to do the work that you need to do that's also not joyful. Right?
Absolutely.
So.
I want to get to this idea that was also mentioned in your presentation yesterday, which I thought was amazing, and I want to hear from all of you about this, is this idea of institutional building as its own art form or as an art form. And you know, when Alex was giving me a tour of the show or the exhibition space, you know, she made it very clear this is not relational aesthetics, that, you know, this is a specific project, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder if you could speak, and this might be a kind of a vague question, or a hard question, but just in terms of like the aesthetics of what that looks like, what, like, you know, thinking about institutional building and what that looks like as an art form, actually. I mean, in your work, it really does make sense, but I also would say, I imagine that's part of it as well, or kind of thinking about that as much as possible. But I wonder if you guys could speak to this idea, maybe starting with you, Geisha.
So many people often confuse, like, what is Good School really do? You know, we call ourselves like art collectives, but what is it that we really do? You know, like, because we always give pictures of people hanging out spaces, but like, there's always a question, like, where is the art? You know, we often get, even like in for our projects in Documenta, this question keeps coming, like, where is the art? You know, like, honestly, maybe we are at the terms like when we enter and we grew up, you know, since our art puberty or something in this ecosystem, like we just think, yeah, we are here for art, you know, like, and then like we always base on our practice on what we need, you know. We need to pay the rent, we need to have a space, we need to like have an exhibition. These people already have like 1,000 drawings, let's display them all. So it's always based on that, you know, and on necessity. So after that, of course, we always need to articulate our practice when we are get invited to this, like, we have to face this question, what is the art? So we thought about, okay, when we are trying to create these protocols, methodologies, way to build conviviality, way to build collectivity, that's what we always been questioning, you know, like with me and MG and other members, even when we are like driving home or something, that's our questions, like, how do we solve like this miscommunications, how we can make people comfortable? So we thought about the formulas, the way we organize these people as our poem, for example. It's like the poetic things that we do, you know, like we experiment the way, you know, with this dress code of serious meeting, or like the way people exchanging knowledge. So we like to believe, at least from our part, that the way we think about this through and through all days, sometimes like in 3 a.m. in the morning, like this is the way we operate, you know, imagining this institutional building as part of our, and also because also one way we see it is that the way we work is not like the way industry or government works, you know, like it's 9 to 5, it's really confined with many paperwork or some things, but in a way we are kind of like them, you know, when we build like this unit business, we deal with these legal papers, but also there are things that we self-organize ourselves. So we thought that undefinable thing is our art practice, you know, that's not incomparable with the way is let's say government or bureaucracy or corporatocracy work, the way corporate work. I'm sorry.
Corporatocracy is a good word. It's a good word. It's a good word.
Sarah?
Okay, what was the question?
Well, I think I'm just curious, and like, I mean, maybe this is, again, it's kind of a hard question.
I think I can answer it.
Yeah, but you know, just thinking about what the aesthetics of, you know, institutional building as an art form looks like, you know, or how that may, particularly working for an institution and working for an institution that's, you know, almost like focuses on the artist first and foremost, like what does that look like, particularly as I'm sure, you know, it's a different situation every year, so it looks different, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think for better or for worse, I always separate the two things, right? So there's Skowhegan, the organization, and there's Skowhegan, what happens in the summer on that site in Maine. And they're contingent on each other, but what happens on that site in Maine in some ways kind of leads what happens in that organizational level. So for this conversation, I'll talk about that summer in particular. Because one of the good things and bad things about having a completely new group every year is that you're always starting from scratch, which in lots of ways is an opportunity because you actually get to change how you enact this institution for this 9 weeks every year with a new group of voices, with new information from the last group, with all kinds of different ideas and visions about how to go forward. But the way that I try to start each summer is really talking about what is it going to look like for us to build this institution here together. What are the things that we understand that we're loosely holding in common as far as values go? Mm-hmm. What are the things that we actually need to acknowledge that we don't share as values? And then how are we going to kind of interact as we go through that process together? So it is, whatever. I'm still the boss, right? So the fact that we're doing that exercise is my decision, but it is something that we try to engage with as a collective, not a collective in the way that you all are a collective, but in a moment for those 9 weeks that helps us to kind of be able to hear each other and see each other and be able to talk about our different histories and understand the context for each individual's work, right? Because Skowhegan, we can talk about like these moments where we come together as a collective, but it really is about an individual's experience within their studio, within their own practice. But we inevitably have to kind of overlap at moments. So making those moments as productive as possible.
Absolutely. I think I want to ask a question about, again, kind of the remit of this program and thinking about the infrastructure and the infrastructure of the art world. And it was interesting with the conversation I was having with Maria-Hélène yesterday in terms of, in my mind, I'm thinking of a very specific infrastructure to my world, specifically based in New York, as writing for an art magazine. And really think about everyone in this room likely has a different idea of what infrastructure is to their place or where they are, or who they, what part of the art world they're kind of working as, whether an artist or art administrator, what have you. And I'm just curious, and I'd love to hear kind of from your perspective, from Good School in Jakarta, and also Sarah in terms of working at Skowhegan, what do you want to see changed in that infrastructure, or what is the main thing that is irking you within the current climate that we live in now, as art professionals? I know that's a big, but I'm I feel like that is the question.
No, just kidding.
What I can see, I think it is also others member from Good School. We always having a hard time about access. So why we are being a collective, why we are gathered in collective, it's all about the access. So in your question about what can be changed or what the purpose that we are going to do, actually to exercise always again and again about this access, going to a system, for example, and also the ecosystem more bigger than collective itself, because we also thinking the collective itself is the smallest ecosystem, right? And then there is a city or even in country, in the art scene in Indonesia, for example, and also in others. So I think that's the thing that always we are exercising by build the infrastructure, physical infrastructure at our place. We have divided the space as a dormitory, the aula,
the hall,
and ping pong space there, card space there, and also the studios here and farm also there. That's we always playing, always see things in the play, in the fun way. How we can play these things, always like that. Since we are we founded in a big warehouse back 2015. We are try to play how come if we can erase the budget of yearly rent from each of the collective. So we moved to the big warehouse, we rent it. It's so much fun. It's very experimenting. It's play for us, but it's a good experience to run that very big warehouse facility for 2 years, and then now we move now in Jagakarsa, our places right now, and then we turn it the name into a good school, because last time we are more focused like more into ecosystem. That's why the name is Gudang Sarina Ecosystem. And then when we are moving, we are focused on how to distribute it. So it's good school. The name is right.
Yeah, yeah, and also like about the access is because we realize like from individual level to collective, they have their own struggles, and to answer that, there is abundance of resource somewhere else. Somebody else might have the answer to this collective. So that's why the question about how we can make the distribution and the access is more reachable, at least for our friends, you know, in Indonesia context. Because, like for example, the practice, a collective practice in Indonesia, there is a lots of them, but like maybe that have the access to the international network or something, maybe only some of them. So that's why one of the things that we are always like to do is to bring these collectives that part of our ecosystem, part of our friends, to also like have this access. Like one time we are invited by University of Cambridge, we let our collective studies participant to speak, you know, rather than us in the forefront. So and so that's why like the idea to open the access, but also to know what do they really need, you know, to, you know, in order to matchmake that access.
I feel like I'm putting you on the spot.
No, it's fine. This is why we're here. I guess the best way for me to answer this question is kind of avoid the question in a weird way, which is also kind of how I've dealt with my kind of perception of what the art world is, right? Which is to kind of avoid it by going to Maine, right? So in a weird way, it is like an opting out, but it's not an opting out without any sort of other kind of dealing with the issues. It's just dealing with it in a different way. So, you know, I think the art world, for me, if we take the art world infrastructure as like this invisible container, I think the frustration is always that it's more conservative than it pretends to be. And so by being in Maine and being away from that infrastructure, then we offer and are experiencing a different way to kind of think about the demands of that conservative structure and what we have the capacity, how the capacity to engage with it, to not engage with it, to re-envision it, to like slowly start to change it over time as we kind of go back into the world, into some other kinds of futures. And I think, again, particularly with the group of artists that I've been working with at Skowhegan over time, many of whom haven't had access or don't necessarily have that experience with the art world, actually can use their time at Skowhegan to start to actually envision something completely different that isn't reliant on that same conservative network.
Right.
So,
but I think, so I'm curious, and this relates perhaps more to your situation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. But I think, you know, in thinking about that, like, how do you address like careerism in that case?
Yeah.
Like, how does that really shape, like, in terms specifically to Skowhegan, but I guess also in terms of your network as well, like in kind of the structure of what Good School is and how to like get access to funding and giving opportunity to some of the artists in your collectives. Like, how does like careerism really, you know, in thinking about, you know, I guess getting ahead or what have you, or supporting artists in general? Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, okay, so I don't know if I'm going to answer this. I'm going to answer this in two parts. One, the first part is the perceptual idea that you go to Skowhegan to help your career, which maybe, yes.
Or other residency programs like Studio Museum or what have you.
Yeah, so we get a lot of applications. My guess is that 90% of those people believe that this is the thing that they have to do to put on their resume to then get looked at.
Right.
That is very different than what happens once you enter into the landscape of Maine. And that actually kind of goes away. And some of that's because of the way that we talk about things and what we're doing together. And some of it's just because and this is where the landscape becomes really helpful, is like you're just kind of dumped into the woods and you don't have any of the things that kind of remind you of that careerism. So it's much easier to be away from that kind of way of thinking. And then all of the other things pile on top of that. So that's one category.
Yeah.
And then the second category, I guess, is more complicated, right? Because not all of us have had stability, and not all of us have come from backgrounds of financial ability. And so there always has to be a balance once you go back into the world of understanding that I also have to survive. And I'm not gonna, when the art world was more one group of humans that maybe didn't have the same struggles as all of the people that are in the formal art world now have had, that it's really important to recognize that you can also need to secure your career and also innovate in other ways simultaneously. And there are a lot of young artists that are working now, even in this collective group that we are working with now, that have to kind of find that balance between the two things. And then I'll just add a third part to that,
please.
which is also that, Skowhegan is an old institution. It's been around for 75 years. The idea of careerism exists because I think to some extent it's true, right? People do look at who has gone to Skowhegan as a pre-vet, we'll call it. And so I've seen my role as to say, if they're reading the book of Skowhegan, how do we change the pages within that book? So then again, that who is speaking and who is getting the opportunity and who is out in the world is already presenting a different story than the art world that we've all kind of become accustomed to or lived within under, right? It's not really about this moment now. It's what's this going to be in 10 years?
Sure.
That's
great.
Well, to be honest, I just heard this term careerism.
It's capitalism.
Yeah.
Well, maybe because the one that stays in good school, usually we are misfits, we are some crazy people who choose to be in this kind of undefinable, our family doesn't really get it, what we do, but we still do it anyway, kind of thing. So maybe because of this kind of there is a shameless approach in our members, we don't, it's okay, for example, one of our participants, she started working. She asked our opinion when she wanted to start working in an art fair because she knows what good school is, and we were yeah, just try it. You wouldn't believe, you wouldn't know unless you tried about the art fair, the bad things about it or the good things about it. And then after 1 year, she was regretting her choice. That's on her. But at least that, but to have that I don't know, to making a square or blockings, don't do these things. If you you have to be pure on these things. I think there is a bit of that culture to be shameless. You can be art handler by day, but then again the next day you do this straight art. You do this kind of curating kind of thing. So it's about creating spaces for our participants, for our member, for our collective to try different kind of thing because. We always experiment, right? We always try something new. There is a new technology coming. There is new things. There is new problem come. So I think to be not trapped in that kind of thing is to always give space and that appreciation whenever someone start trying new. There's always going to be criticism for someone who already have previous experience in that field. But I think that learning process is really necessary. I think in order to support the participants, the members, in order to choose whatever path they want to survive, some of our friends work in the government, in the Ministry of Culture. Maybe some other collective was no, you are part of the government now. But we were no, it's okay. Go there and then tell us the gossip, what's happening in the government. So to have that, that flexible approach to whatever decision that our members have, and to know that whatever they did, they're gonna give it back again to our ecosystem. To have that trust, I think.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of misinterpretation with this collective. When you go in the collective, there is no individualism there. I mean, it stops your career as individual. But what our experience actually is support each other. The collective need this individual to have a spotlight because it's going to be beneficial for the collective.
Right, there's a practicality to it, yeah.
also sebaliknya.
The other way around.
The other way around.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like Gesyada said, it's okay if someone has their interest in another field or find a new path, for example. It's also going to be a good thing for the collective. That's what we are always trying to open.
This kind of goes back to the debate, right? So like you can have all of these people existing in one space together and they can all be different.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually undermine anything, it actually kind of makes it builds it in a different way.
Yeah, it enriched the process and our knowledge because because sometimes our assumptions or like our prejudice towards like certain field, because we never really went there, we don't really know. We often find that someone who actually works in the system, how they hate it, and then like so that's why I think that by actually experiencing that, by having our members, for example, be in that part, so we have more understanding. And also back again to that access kind of thing, because I think it's all about misunderstanding, all of the problems in the world. So it's about, contextualizing that and understanding that became.
Even there is it's also not, there is happening. I mean, there is my friends they are in the 4 collective, very active.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hours and a lot of names.
Because he is a very adaptable person, so he can do here, can do that.
Yeah.
And then each collective also need it, and then it's okay when you are busy with that collective. It's okay, and then so it's strange relationship, but it's happening.
I wonder, I'm curious to know, because thinking about the members of your collective and how diverse it is, and what I loved about your presentation yesterday is that you started off by highlighting the security guards, right? Like right off the bat, which I thought was brilliant, and really getting a sense of that community. And I'm curious to know for you, Sarah, as well, this idea of like, working with community, building relationships with community, how that really affects like kind of your collective, your institution, how that sort of interplay with like learning from people outside of our kind of art bubble, and how to incorporate that within your structures and relationships, what have you. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that, if that makes sense.
Okay. Maybe it's helpful because whenever we move to some place, so we have been moving for like 3 times or something, and our members, there's always going to be someone who lives there, and that helps because in order to survive in this place, they have to know which is the grocery store, where to buy the cigarettes, like where's the laundry space, and all that, and in that way we can come as a friends, we can come as a regular customer, building this relationship with the neighborhood, and then it's really important to come as a friends first and building their trust. They don't have to know yet about us working like as an artist or something, but like they need to know us as a person first, like a human. What is our favorite food whenever we come there? So it was really important. And so, for example, in GUDSKUL, the head of our venue lives in GUDSKUL, and he mingles with like the laundry guy, with the local police and something. So after a while, because he also stayed there, the locals starting to know what we are, especially the resources. And so whenever they need something, they have the trust to come to us and ask for something. For example, there is a mosque in front of GUDSKUL, and whenever they have some sort of like congregations, they're gonna borrow our projectors. So it's a projector for showing experimental films. The other one is showing like the Quran verses, also like that kind of functions. So and then it also because in front there is like an open space, and then like someone bring like a domino and chess, and then the locals also like to stay there and then just playing chess, and then during that domino game, we start to have a conversation like, where did you go yesterday? And they will start like, we were doing this exhibition, National Gallery. Oh, what you going to do there? So that's kind of form, the way we can explain and mingle. So I think it's really important to come as a friend first, rather than, we are bringing you, we are helping you or something. So we genuinely know what do they need and how we can help with our resources, for example.
Amazing.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think it's important. I think in the context of the US, residencies, colleges and universities that are typically embedded in neighborhoods or towns, there's always kind of a split, right? And so coming as a friend, as a contributing member of a community is really important. And for our particular situation, there are going to be artists within the summer program that want to do things in town, but it's also, kind of my job to also recognize that it's not we were talking a lot about labor, it's not their labor that should be doing the goodwill, right?
Yeah,
It's the organizational commitment that has to do that. And so similar, like we're going to build a bunch of informational kiosks around the wetlands at the beginning of the summer, or we'll host a meeting, or, we'll send somebody from our staff that will go and teach like cell phone photography workshops at the local high school. But it is about being present in both project-based ways, but also kind of consistently. So like employing people, paying them fair wages, using our kind of institutional leverage to kind of contribute to the economic life of our town. There are all kinds of ways in which we do it, but also just making sure we're not just here as guests. We're not here as like on vacation, like our privileged summer vacation where we're just going to go up to Maine and have a great time and then go. We live there. I mean, I don't actually live there, but I live there in my mind.
But I wanted to touch on this idea that I was thinking about based on both your presentations, yours yesterday and yours this afternoon or this morning, and this idea of necessity, which you mentioned earlier. And I think with the presentation this morning around the labor unions in the U.S. and thinking specifically at the sort of Amazon's labor union as an example, and this idea that the need for it was it's like a kind of a way of a reason for its success. That necessity really kind of it's almost about survival. And I wonder. Yeah, and I think about, Good School as being a kind of successful model based on this necessity. And you talked about it in terms of like, we needed it to like collectively afford a space together, very practically. I wonder if you could speak about this idea of necessity, and how it's, it could be, as a reason, or I was just thinking that this is like kind of a missing thing that perhaps might be lost in other collectives or other projects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, like I think it's also in the notions, like when you want to make art, make it genuine, like you have to be honest about it. So in terms of like collective practice, I think we are aware that not to get carried away with jargons, with like, big issues or something, when we don't feel resonated with that, because it can get carried away, especially when you have to present it to public or present it in the other art friends or something. You need to like articulate what we do, and then like and seeing the trends, seeing the terms that being keep used. Like it will be tempting to get carried away with that, but we always like to reflect like what do we really want to do? What is what we really obsessed and keen on working about, like if nobody pays for it, if nobody supports it, do we still want to do it? That's, I think that where the necessity as a drive really important for us, with so many things happen in the world, we need to like reflect, like do we want to genuinely do this? So that's why like to base our decision making, to base our practice on what we actually really need. I think that's what makes us stay, and also what makes us keep going, because like when you say successful, actually we've been like always trying to find a way, like how to maintain the artistic side of us and how to also maintain the organizational, the administrations, the operational kind of thing. But I think also when you know that you need it and somehow it fails, being a collective helps that to know that there's always going to be someone that will try to find a solution again together. So I think that because sometimes the way why we build collective is we know that we cannot work alone. You cannot be lonely in doing this kind of thing. So that's why in order to realize this necessity, we need to build a solidarity. We need to build like comrades, like other people who will back you up and then tell you when you were wrong, and then like can lead you to that direction.
Maybe as a sample, before we don't have any program focus kids to kids, but now we have Ruru Kids. It's a program for kids and parents. Actually, it's very very simple. The reason why, because our member start having a kids. So when they are coming with their kids, sometimes the kids is being
Yeah, just like we drop them there and assume that other member will be like the nanny and the caretaker.
Yeah, because the parents should have a meeting. You know?
Yeah.
So that's happen, and then start thinking, why don't we make this program for
And
kids
space
and parents, because we also needed how to parenting and so on, and then now we have this program and dedicated space for kids. So yeah, for me it's a good, so I can bring my daughter and then put there, and then while I go upstairs.
Yeah.
So that's a very practical sample in terms of necessity, and in the big issue in collective, it's so many in Indonesia. It's easy to make a collective, but it's hard to sustain. So there's always the same problem looping again and again. It's how they can sustain. So that's why we think we have to have a lot of meeting to share with many collective to discuss what is your challenging in your place, in your city, and how is the context of your city. So maybe we can sort of support each other somehow. That's what trying to do with this collective studies program that's already happening since we are moving in the Jagakarsa in 2018 until now. Now we are going open to the 5th batch. So that's all that what we are to fulfill our needs actually.
Amazing. I have more questions, but I wonder if it's a good time to...
Thank you so much for a very beautiful conversation. Thank you, Terence, for all these great questions. I really like how much we've been talking about access. And I just wanted to talk about this from the Raw perspective. It being an institution that is operating in what is called the Global South, even if it's not the term I want to use in this context. But like it being this institution that really started all the work from scratch, like from very small amount of resources, and also not so many people, etc., but that really managed to establish itself and ground itself in a context that really needed the work that's being done there. And of course that also managed to have all these sister institutions and allies that are based in different places, different geographies, and that are very much aligned with the realities of our context, and that are really working towards making changes, but making changes even though being in very precarious situation. And we often joke saying that, okay, people talk about Raw, they say Raw, but like it's this tiny institution, tiny space, you come there, you're like, oh, this is Raw. Actually, maybe you get even disappointed when you come in front of the building, but when you get in there, you realize how much it's important that the institution was built based on the necessity for the individuals to be represented properly, and for the individuals to have the space of expression that's needed in order for the institution itself to exist. And I'm very happy that you're talking about this question of access, because the fact that we have been working together with other institutions that have the same value, Rangrupa being part of it, and then now GUDSKUL, and I'm happy to properly meet Sarah out of the train, and to see that these are values that are carried by other institutions in other geographies, and that there are chains of solidarities that are being formed, nourished, and maintained in a way that allows for all of us to be able to do what we do still, even though the precarity is there, and making sure that it's being done in a very valuable way for ourselves, to like as a starting point, for our communities, our context, but also for our peers who are working in other geographies that can be way more difficult than the one in which we are into. And I wanted to talk about this as a way of also highlighting the fact that it's been important to have this conversation, no? Like to have you together here, and to have Linda's vision about what type of conversation do we want to highlight in this whole academy. And this is the one, and I'm very happy that it's happening. And of course, I wanted to thank everybody for that and for sharing all of this, because it's not all the time that you get to hear about the reality of an institution. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I guess I'm thinking about what makes something a collective versus an institution for you, and then similar maybe for Sarah, in what ways is Skowhegan an institution for you? And I guess I'm just interested in questioning that in the larger framework of the art world, where institution has a very specific and sometimes negative connotation, perhaps.
For sure.
So that's, yeah, open-ended question.
I use the word institution to describe Skowhegan because of that perception, right, in a weird way, which is, A, to acknowledge its power, its responsibility, and also how it kind of gets caught up in all of this other stuff. So, like, pretending it's a collective or pretending it's the way, you know, that it is organized in the way that GUDSKUL is organized is not truthful. And that's really important to make clear. That doesn't mean that we stay in that kind of functioning when we're together and when we're working and that kind of institution isn't immovable, but it's really important for me to name that. And I think that's like, you know, I mean, obviously every place has to kind of make that determination for themselves, but that's a specific choosing for me. I could call us a nonprofit, and it sounds much more innocent, right?
Why we make the name is GUDSKUL is because we want public or anyone see that as a school that they already know the idea of the school, because what we are experiencing after years, that I say also before in the presentation, that we are learning in our collective. So this is our school actually. Then what we do when we are become a GUDSKUL, actually we're not changing how we work as like a school. Like there is, you know, like normal school. We just do it as we are doing before, like making a discussion, exhibition, presentation, making a festival, just like before, actually. Because that's how we learn. But we are intentionally to use GUDSKUL so people can connect that. That's why that's how we play the idea of the institution. And then now it's also become the challenge, our challenge. It's getting the connection, what we are facing is getting bigger. So that's the challenge, to keep flexible, because that's the trap of the institution, right? When you are become the institution, you have a legal that's become kaku.
Rigid,
Yes. So we always trying to keep flexible, easy to change. That's what we are.
I just want to add one more thing to that question too. It's also, for me, it's like by naming it an institution, by also naming myself as an authority within an institution, it also starts to model, when we come together there as an institution, how you can mess with institutions, right? Like it doesn't always have to be this thing that is rigid and concrete and inaccessible and like the person in power. We have an idea, and it's mostly true, that like you don't interact with people in power as client, person in power, you know, that relationship. And so in making the way that we operate institutional, it starts to kind of add a layer of like, oh, this is actually what an institution could look like. And I can participate in this. And I'm not just subject to your authority. I'm actually in dialogue, and we can start to model different manifestations of power, I guess, is power dynamics, and changing the expectation.
Maybe you spoke about this before, I had to step out, but how do you evaluate yourselves in terms of your, like, we'll be talking about failure, but how do you evaluate when there's success, and if failure is integrated into success? How do you evaluate that? And also, how do you handle scale?
Yeah.
You know, when is enough? When do you induct new? When do you let go and downsize? How does that, you know, and when does that come up? And another question inside of that is, how do you prepare for the future, especially the future after you? Is there archiving of this knowledge? Is there, you know, I know GUDSKUL last night, you shared a lot about those tools, but yeah, just to elaborate more on that. That's it. Small questions.
The answer is not small. You're talking about scale. Scale. Maybe just a quick answer, like how to evaluate the especially success. I think we need to listen to our body. When we done a project, when we're working on a project, you know, we all have experienced that. We may be fatigued, we are exhausted, but we felt like there's something going, you know. When everybody else is like very excited, you know, like that 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in the exhibition halls, the work is not installed, but you feel like there's something going, there's something bubbling, and it was fun, it was make you happy. But also there might be other projects where like it doesn't require much energy, but you feel exhausted somehow because of the air, because of something is not vibing, let's say, something like that. So I think for us, like we deal with so many events that maybe not many people come, only our friends, or maybe events that like have hundreds of people came. But I think quantity is not the measure for that. I think it's all about like how it felt in yourself, you know, when you feel, because burnout, because there's going to be burnout, there's going to be something like that. But if you can intuitively and empathetically felt that, you know, like yeah, okay, only 2 people came, and then they are my best friends. So, but like we're having a good time. They're listening to me explaining about my artwork. That's okay, you know, like, and they give you a very thorough feedback about yourself, rather than 100 people and then just taking pictures in front of your work. But doesn't say much, you know. Like I think that affective quality is how, for all of us, I think, evaluate our success. And also for us is often what kind of lesson do we have? We have many exhibitions especially when we are recruiting new team, because to also continue with the how to handle scale, sometimes the bigger the scale of the project is, you need more people. When you need more people, you need to allow more failures, because especially for people who doesn't know GUDSKUL, they don't know algorithm, they're gonna get confused, they don't know who to ask, and that's where the scale comes in, you know, like when there's so many people you have to pay, you have to handle, you have to take care of. And I think it's comeback again, it always comes from a friend. For example, like whenever we want to recruit gallery sitter, liaison officer, we always have that someone, our juniors from university or our friends who we know, and then they're gonna invite someone on their proximity. So we sort of like know that they are on the same frequency, at least. They have the same likeness, they have the same humor. So I think that, you know, that multi-level marketing of friendship helps, you know, like in order to, I don't know, yeah, maybe some, you know, not like a pyramid scheme, but, you know, like a friends of friends of friends. And then like they come, you know, like have that affinity, have that proximity will help in order to handle scale, you know. So at least at the very least, they know about Good School, they know about us, or they know about this person. Sometimes because they stay just because to help this person, you know, like, so I think that's for me. So, Sarah, Mas MG.
Well, I guess when you are a director, an authority that lives in an open format kind of situation, you don't really have to evaluate yourself. Everybody tells you, in good and both good and bad ways. So, I mean, I think it's an important actual part of what I consider my job is like being in dialogue at all times. I don't know, it was 24 hours a day at Skowhegan, like what's working, what's not working, all of that stuff in real time. Because again, that's how I learn. That's how we learn as an institution. So that's one level. And then the second level, I guess, is really, you know, going back to the patience thing, is like understanding that like the learning at Skowhegan doesn't always become obvious at Skowhegan. And so sometimes it's something that happens afterwards and into the future. And so watching how people are working, what they're making, what they're talking about, how they're relating to each other, how they're helping other people, that's when I feel like I've done my job. So it's not even like overt, right? It is just like, oh, look at that. Or like when we wanted volunteers for Project Eats, and when, you know, 60 people showed up for the entire summer, that's when you know it works, right? So, and then scale is a really good question, because I think scale is really confusing in the art world and in the world in general, in capitalism in general, right? The idea that you always are getting bigger, you're always getting better, you're always doing more, you have to take the model and put it here and put it there. Not interested in that, right? So I think it's really important for me in particular to make sure that we don't go bigger, we just get deeper, right? And as relates to that evaluation and preparing for the future and scale, is like every year when we're there and everybody's calling me with their complaints and their happinesses 24/7, is listening to that, and you realize like the limitations of what you yourself can see that is based on your own subjectivity. And so that there's more and more and more and more and more to do that doesn't actually equal getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it can never end.
Those are amazing comments, and I want to again thank everyone for everything that you've contributed here today. And I wanted to pick up on both of your comments, because I think that, you know, the individual has agency within institutions, and that's where I think we find change, and also this modeling other forms of institutions. And I neglected to mention that you're all Raw visiting faculty. So, and we're here within the session room that we've built within the gallery to house this other organization within our organization. And I'm really interested, because MG and Geisha, you also have disappeared within the name of Good School. So you're also individuals within your organization, your collective, but you mentioned the school. And I've been thinking a lot about how, ICA is part of University of Pennsylvania, which maybe represents one model of pedagogy. Raw Académie, which is a very different temporality model of learning, being together, horizontal, based geographically different, with a different set of reference points. And then I think about, Good School claiming the name of the school and also inverting what it means to be a teacher versus a study partner. You said like a curriculum versus a local culture. So I've been thinking a lot about the way that you also claim the word school and the way that Sarah's talking about claiming institutions. And then Sarah, I often think of Skowhegan as this, as a space that people go after school. And Koyo was also talking about the academy as being a place that is really crucial for people who are either in between school programs or just out of school to find their path. So it's more that I wanted to throw that out there to also think about the school or the learning, the space of being together as another set of relationships that I think we could reclaim, problematize, mobilize with all the different perspectives that you all represent.
Well, on that note, I think we'll end the conversation. I want to thank you, Sarah, Geisha, and MG for participating in the conversation. Again, I feel very privileged to be just part of this program or just involved in, the little that I've been, the short time that I've been here, and it's been great. And then again, thank you to Raw and ICA for having me. It's been great. And I'm hoping we could continue the conversation. I have to leave, but I hope you all continue the conversation without me. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.